Yes, whenever you are.
Yes,
I'm
we are
ready.
recording.
All right. Good evening and welcome to the Board of Education Ad-Hoc Inclusion and Education Justice Committee meeting. Today is Wednesday, May 6, 2026, and the time is 6 o'clock p.m. My name is Sharon McCready-Pritchett, Chair of the Ad-Hoc Committee. Joining me tonight are Norwalk Board of Education members Jasmine Prezi, Howard White, and Garrett Oliver. And also along with us tonight is Deputy Superintendent Sandra Fayowis. I can't tell if there's anybody else with you tonight, Sandra. Is there anybody else?
Yes,
Mary, I
Mary
can't.
Ann Shepherd is also here.
Executive Director of Leadership Development, Mary Ann Shepherd, is here with us this evening as well. Anybody else that I can't see here?
No, ma'am, I believe you got everybody.
Yep. First, I'll entertain a motion to approve the February 24, 2026 minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion from Garrett and a second.
Howard.
Second by Howard. The motion is passed. Ms. Fayowis, I will turn it over to you for the 25-26 notable achievements.
Thank you so much, and good evening, board members. Marianne and I are actually super excited to share with you some of the happenings in our work for the last couple of months. We haven't seen each other actually in a couple of months, so it gives us a good material to go over. I'm going to share a presentation. And Marianne and I will be presenting casually. We will toggle back and forth between each other, but I'm now going to, oops, I don't know what I just did, but I just lost my own presentation.
Sandra, just to interrupt for a minute, I see Jasmine is on as an attendee. I don't know, she maybe need to be
She needs to be, thank you so much for seeing that.
You.
Yes, she needs to be. Felix, will you promote her?
There she is.
Yes, she's joined as a panelist already.
Okay, I start sharing just so that hi, Jasmine.
I'm here. Thank you,
Okay,
everyone.
awesome. Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Perry, for joining us. I will now go on with the presentation. Well, thank you so much, and we will begin, and we have a lot of exciting things to share. We actually just had our final principals meeting and assistant principals meeting yesterday and today, and some of this information was also shared with them, and I think we've had such a successful spring quarter for this work. It's not advancing, so my apologies. My apologies. Let me share. Okay. See, Felix, this is why we get on early so that we can practice these things. I think I may.
Gotta love tech, right? You never know.
Listen, you never know. Are you able to see my screen or no at this point?
Not right now.
No. Okay. So then let me get out. I may have to do it where it's not in slideshow mode. I apologize, but we will try our best. Let's see. Okay, share. Okay, it's going to have to be like this with the ribbon on the side. I apologize. But so the topics that we have today are just some updates, and then we're going to talk to you about the equity audit debrief that was conducted by Dr. Fergus, and then we're going to talk about some commitments moving forward. And are you able to see it pretty well like this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This works.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Actually, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Shepherd. Mary Ann, do you want to take the first bullet? Yeah.
Absolutely. Good evening, board members. It's a pleasure to be here to share out some of the work that's been going on. Throughout the school year, we obviously monitor student learning through a variety of assessments. But for our third grades 3 through 8, every spring, actually, they just started yesterday, taking their assessments. And one of the indicators that we pay close attention to is how much growth are students making year over year. This is particularly important because we want to make sure that all students are making at least a year of growth with every year. But for our students who might be starting a little bit below grade level, we actually want to see accelerated growth so that we're closing those gaps. And so here you're looking at the data from the last 4 years for ELA, and where it says average percent of target achieved. What that means is that the state, for each individual student, sets an annual growth target for that student based on where their starting point is. And then at the end of the year, the state actually will calculate what percentage of that growth did they make. And then they take all of those students and the amount of growth that they made, and they take an average of that. And so what you're seeing in the top 3 bar graphs is our Norwalk ELA data, again, for grades. In this case, it's 4 through 8 because third grade is a baseline year. And what you can see is for the past 3 years, our ELA growth has exceeded the state growth for high needs students. But last year was the first year that our growth for an ELA exceeded the state's growth for all students as well. So you can see now we're in a place where all students, high needs students and non-high needs, the amount of growth that our students are making is exceeding the state average. And, I really just want to say this is a testament to the work the schools are doing to support teachers with implementing curriculum, improving instructional strategies, using data to identify where students may have gaps so that they can provide those just-in-time supports so that those gaps don't widen over time. And Sandra, if you could go to the next one. So this is a similar slide, but now we're focusing on math. And here you can see for the 4 consecutive years, Norwalk's math growth, again for the high needs students, has exceeded that of the state's average. And so we're seeing like we have years of showing this, exceeding the amount of growth for our high needs students. But again, in 24-25, we saw the math growth exceed the states for all students as well. And as we think about wanting to provide access and opportunity for all students, we want to make sure we're meeting each and every student where they are and helping to accelerate their learning and to support their growth towards important benchmarks. This next one right here is showing our graduation rates. So while we were just looking at, elementary school and middle school data, we know ultimately all of this is leading towards our students and, graduating from our high schools and of course being ready for a post-secondary. And so here you can see we continue to use data to really identify how are all students doing, but also using the data to really like zero in onto specific subgroups. And here you can see the trajectory for the Black and Hispanic students, where 1920 was a low, but there's been this steady increase happening, since then. This similar graph, but with a different subgroup of our students or our MLLs. Again, you can see that low happening in 1920, a very sharp increase, and then it stayed the same, but then again in 23-24, seeing that improvement happening.
And it's remarkable if you look at where there was that decrease in 1920 and up until last year's. And a similar thing, actually, you want the chart to go in the opposite direction when you're talking about chronic absenteeism. And so then with our chronic absenteeism data, you could see that we've been making strides. And today, chronic absenteeism, you have to check it from day to day. And today we can still report that we are under the state average. So from last year to the previous year, we had decreased by 2%. Now, 2 percentage points may not sound like a lot, but when you are already under the state average, 2 percentage points actually is a big decrease. And we've decreased from the peak in 2021 by almost 10 percentage points. And I will show you that for this past year, if you look at our most vulnerable populations, these are high need students. We are 2 percentage points again lower than we were at this point in time last year. For our MLL students, we are 3 percentage points lower than we were at this time last year. And for our special education population, we are 2 percentage points lower. And really what that speaks to, again, is what Marianne is saying, which is the work that is being done at the schools to address what are the barriers for these students getting to school, and then keeping students engaged. I think that they go hand in hand. So both addressing the needs of the family, or because obviously for younger children, it is usually typically a family need that is preventing them from accessing school. And as students get older, it could either be a family need or it could be a more personal disengagement. And so with that being said, you have to make sure that you have those supports in place, but also that the curriculum is challenging and engaging and that students can see themselves in the curriculum. Again, if you look at the ethnic breakdown, you could see that overall there's been improvement, but our Black students, which is this blue line here at the top, we see that steady decline in chronic absenteeism for a population of students that had typically been much more overrepresented in absenteeism than the other ethnic groups in our district. Our Hispanic and Latino populations also continue to decline, even though more recently we had all of that national scares with ICE and just sort of that atmosphere of some of our students perhaps not feeling safe coming to school. But we've been able to actually prove that the schools have been a safe place for everybody. And that's been really, really great for our families to trust us with their children and to trust that we're going to keep their children safe. And again, a testament to what the school leaders are doing and the staff at the school is doing. And similar for students with 2 or more races and for our white students. You will see that the gap is still there. So we're still overrepresented in those Black and brown populations with our chronic absenteeism. But the decline is at a greater rate for our Black students than it had been in the past. And so we're hoping to close that gap through the strategies that we have been implementing with our equity work and also our curriculum work. And another point that I want to bring out about this collective impact, we name collective impact when you're talking about not just the resources that the district is providing, but also the strategies that the schools are doing, and really like the professional development that is led by Ms. Shepherd, and then that train the trainer model, where we hope that the principals, the school leaders, the coaches, and the other central office team members that attend those professional developments bring back to the school. Another symptom of that, or another way that that comes across, is just the number of incidences that students are having, or the behavior incidents. Usually, typically, students have behavior incidences, not just because of their own behaviors, but also how the staff is interacting with these students when students are feeling dysregulated, or when students are not making good choices. And so then what we have noticed is that there's been this huge decrease for our Black students that had been overrepresented in our suspension data. So from the peak, I think in, sorry, I can't see behind this. From the peak in 2023, 24, around here, we have reduced 16%, which is still trending even lower for this upcoming school. So we really have been not just providing the training for the schools, but also focused on belonging, focused on ways to have students connect to their school community to really help students navigate these challenges as they come up. And for some, just creating a safer culture where students are not in that space. which brings us back to our belonging, which we had said was going to frame our equity work for this year. And we've seen some positive outcomes within our panorama data. We do want to say yesterday, if you were part of our School Governance Council meeting, that some of the SEL questions or the student questions have been revised. So this again is going to be a baseline year because we can't compare this year's responses to last year. But even within the data for this year, what we can say is that students in grades 3 to 5 rank on the 90th percentile nationally for reporting that they have respectful treatment from teachers, and 77% of them expressing excitement about having the same teacher next year. So like if you would have the same teacher, would you want the same teacher? So just that response being favorable indicates that they're having a good experience at the moment. Another notable achievement, it's that students in grades 3 to 5, they rank around the 80th percentile nationally, indicating a comprehensive strength in elementary school environment for school belonging, school climate, school engagement, and rigorous expectations. And if you missed the comparison, when they do a national percentile, we actually compare ourselves to all districts that take the Panorama survey, and there are a great number of them across the country. So that's who we're comparing ourselves to. And also for grades 3 to 5 in emotional regulation, we have ranked in the 70th percentile nationally, suggesting an effective social-emotional learning support for our younger students. Now, with that, there are some opportunities for growth, and they tend to be concentrated in our secondary schools. So student-teacher relationships in our 6 through 12 ranks around the 10th percentile nationally, with only 31% of the students feeling that teachers are concerned if they were upset. And this indicates a gap between teacher and student connections. We did identify some of this also in the school improvement plans, and the school leaders were being more intentional this year around having like strategies like relationship mapping for the students in the upper grades and doing more bonding experiences or ways for teachers to learn more about students in those upper grades. Also, school engagement and school belonging in grades 6 through 12 both rank around the 20th percentile nationally, with only 15% of the students excited about going to classes and only 38% feeling respected by peers. So underperforming compared to about 80% of the schools nationally. So definitely in our secondary schools and with those students that are older, we have to concentrate on that part of our school belonging, and in our elementary schools, which makes a lot of sense because they tend to be with one teacher for the bulk of their time. But I don't want to underscore the challenges that can present also, especially if you're not getting along with your teacher or with your peers. Do you want to talk about a little bit about the work that we did, Marianne, with Paul and the equity leads for this year?
Sure. So we had 4 convenings with our equity leads. Just as a reminder, each school identified an equity lead to attend this professional learning series with us and Paul Forbes. And the sessions over the course of the year really focused on one, understanding best practices to build and foster a sense of belonging, and thinking about like first, how do you gather the data that tells you exactly who's feeling like they belong, who feels like they have a trusted adult to go to, and then what are the actionable strategies that schools can use to make those connections happen in a way that's really systematic and not just relying on individuals connecting organically, but really putting in a system or a structure to make sure that that's happening. Some of our APs earlier today were talking about some of the things they've done. Marvin has a Champions for All initiative where each staff member, and we're not just talking school leaders and teachers, we're talking each staff member, custodian, kitchen worker, have a group of students that they meet with regularly throughout the year. And the goal is just to connect with those students. And this is not about academics. The space is really just about getting to know the child as an individual child and making sure that child has an adult that they feel connected to as well. Schools have approached that in a lot of different ways, but all with the same ultimate goal of just systematically ensuring that students are feeling that sense of belonging and connection. Another kind of through line of the work that we've done is really focus on building up their cultural competency and building up their kind of awareness of how culture plays out in schools. And again, just refining a lens for identifying how is culture showing up, how might people feel that disconnect or dissonance if they don't feel like their culture is being respected. And so there's been a lot of the sessions are very, very interactive, really driven by the perspectives and leveraging like with the experiences that the equity leads are bringing to the table. And one of the things that's been really nice with this particular group is that the equity leads are not one particular role represented. It ranges from there's a principal, there's an assistant principal, there's teachers, there's coach, there's dean, there's counselor, there's special education teacher, so school leaders.
Para-educators.
Yeah, thank you. And so a lot of different roles represented, which is exactly what we're hoping even with our equity teams at the school level, because different perspectives at the table, build a better understanding of how the student experience is playing out at the school. And that we've certainly seen that happen through these equity lead meetings. And so, at our last session, we ended with the sentence starter. Because of our collective work, Norwalk students are, and asked each of the equity leads to respond to that. And actually, we did a similar activity with the principals and the APs yesterday and today. And it's just been really powerful to identify ways that people are seeing not only their individual impacts, but the collective impact of coming together with a committed group of school leaders and equity leads. And so here we have two quotes that were selected just to share because they're pretty representative of what was coming up. And the first one this year, feeling we truly looked at equity in our school building and made sure that we kept each other accountable for our work. There are a lot of competing priorities in a school. And this particular equity lead was talking about how their school, they were very proud of the fact that they kept it front and center and not as like a side initiative. And the second quote you see down there is, we have to, is more about commitment forward. And we have to keep this work in mind so it doesn't become one of the forgotten initiatives in our district. And we couldn't agree more. And Sandra did a really nice job at the end of the last session, just speaking to our continued and ongoing commitment to moving the work forward.
And you could see here one of our equity leads in this photo actually facilitating a training at Rhoton. This is Ashley, and she's the equity lead for Rhoton. But we have countless photos of our equity leads taking the work back and some of the activities that they do during these meetings and actually then turnkeying that and doing it with their staff. So this is just one of the photos. Another thing that if you ever have time and you want to peruse this slide deck, we've linked here all of their reflections for the year. We ended this year, this is like an example. We ended this year with everyone making a commitment to what it is that we're going to hold on to, things that we will not lose, and in a year from now, what we hope for. So all the schools, equity leads participated, so we have one for each school, but it would be too long for us to go through all of them. But you will see this is the one from West Rocks, and it's pretty explicit. So we will not lose a focus on improving student attendance through consistent routines and relationship building practices. We will now lose a commitment to reducing suspensions by prioritizing restorative practices and proactive SCL support. We will now lose high expectations for all students, ensuring those with disabilities are supported to meet grade level standards. I won't read the whole thing, but they're all really powerful, and I had a hard time choosing one. This one I just felt because it was bulleted, it was actually easier for me to share with you so that we don't have to read the entire thing. But each school did one, and I feel that it's this type of commitment that we have from our equity leads, but also from our school leaders. I feel that when they did the exercise today about because of our work, our students can. All of the strategies that they have put in place through their equity work and their equity goals also came up. Marianne, do you want to talk a little bit about the equity report?
Sure. So Dr. Ed Fergus and his team has been working with the district for a number of years. And when he first came into the district, he did an equity audit. And Sandra, has it been 5 years? 6 years?
Six, since
6
the
years.
last one. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so Dr. Estrella and Sandra asked him and his team to conduct another equity report. And so that we could get kind of his sense of where is he seeing the progress and where perhaps are there areas for, for further growth and like real opportunities for us to dig in. So the two areas we asked him to focus on was one, the effectiveness of the practices being used to address disproportionality across the district. So regardless of what the focus was, whether it was academic discipline, like how effectively are we addressing the disparity in the data? The second one is how strong is a culturally responsive mindset showing up in our leadership equity lens? And so to gather the data, there were many surveys, focus groups with the principals, interviews with a variety of staff, and they also reviewed the school improvement plans from the year 22, 23, and then this current school year. Because schools have been setting equity goals and they really wanted to look and see how the theories of action, how have the action plans, how effective have schools become in achieving those equity goals. And so some of the high level findings we wanted to share with you. And the idea in this first part of the sentence is lifted right from the report. Equity has moved from an initiative to an organizing principle in Norwalk. There is a demonstrated commitment to equity, and equity is informing our leadership efforts. And in the report, he's talking about both at the district and at the school leader level.
Yes.
Went on to conclude that through his data analysis, we understand equity as a system and as individuals. There are real strong bright spots for us to learn from and to leverage. And if we think about lifting up and leveraging those bright spots, it can help us with this last bullet, in that we can further grow by operationalizing our work in a more consistent manner. So how can we lift up some of the really exciting work that's happening to increase that level of consistency and reduce any type of variability that's happening? And just also making sure people have an opportunity to learn with and from each other. So, I think one of the things, as I just kind of previously mentioned, really talking about how equity is embedded in leadership thinking. And when he was analyzing their findings from the focus groups and the SIPs, two approaches were really evident. One, a structural kind of frame where it was very focused on data, access, systems, and structures. And another approach, the cultural responsiveness approach, was where more focused on belonging, relationships, culturally responsive practices. Now, there were also times and places where he saw those two approaches being integrated in a way to really maximize impact. And that's ultimately the goal. He saw a very strong focus on student outcomes. We're very data oriented, being very clear about like what is the evidence of impact. But an area for us to kind of dive deeper into is how are we changing the systems so that we have a sustainable impact, regardless of, a person moving on to another role or, yes, we want to be able to achieve our goals in the moment, but we also want to expand, refine, dismantle the practices or the systems or structures so that we're having that long-lasting system change. And so these findings we shared with the principals and the assistant principals yesterday and today, and we asked them to reflect on like, where do you see your school in these findings? What are your next steps as you start to think about your school improvement equity goal for next year? And, an activity that we kind of dove in today is based on this bit of feedback we got from Dr. Fergus and his team is that in some cases they've heard or saw examples of where belonging was being mistaken for equity. And so there were times where the words were being used perhaps interchangeably, and this sometimes happens when you kind of layer on a new aspect to the work with belonging. And so the activity we engaged in today is we gave them a series of statements and we asked them to categorize them into which of these statements are speaking to equity, which are speaking to belonging, which are speaking to both, or are speaking to neither. And the neither was that there was a statement, all students should be treated the same. We know that that's not going to necessarily foster a sense of belonging. And we also know that it's more a focus on equality versus equity. And so through that activity today in the debrief, we surfaced a lot of really good conversation. And I think, people were pushing each other's thinking as we kind of debrief what those statements meant. And so it was a good way to kind of deliver the message around this concept that will then go further into depth with our school leaders in the summer leadership retreat.
Do you want to go over the school improvement plans and what this shows, or?
Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
So, in just looking at schools approach their equity goals in a lot of different ways because it's based on what their data is showing them. And so when they analyze their data, they identify what is an area that we're going to focus on as a school community. And here you can see, looking at the SIPs from the 20, they found that about half were focused on access to advanced programming. So whether that's gifted and talented, accelerated math, honors, AP. So a lot of our schools are really focusing on how do we ensure, a greater number of students have access to these opportunities and then are receiving the support that they need to be able to thrive in those particular courses. You can see about a third we're focusing on disproportionality in some other areas, for example, such as like special education. About 17% of our schools focus on discipline. And across these categories, if you look down on the bottom right, that paragraph, that speaks to some of the subgroup that you would see identified in the school improvement plan goals. So anything from anywhere from MLL students, Black and Hispanic students, first generation college going students. Again, schools are selecting the focus of their goal based on what their data is showing them.
Thank you. And so for us, what we think are our next steps in terms of this work, which we've been communicating to our leaders and to our equity leads, are we have to refine our school improvement plans and their equity goals based on this audit, and also just to make sure that those action plans reflect greater structure and support in operationalizing our equity strategies. So again, like Marianne had suggested, which is independent of who is leading a school or who is leading the work, we have to make sure that we have the structures and the systems in place that that work can carry on and that work is embedded in the school's culture, in the operations of the schools, in our policies, and then in our practices. And so then we have to refine those school improvement action plans to make sure that we are putting in place those structures and those resources. We also want to deepen the work with our equity leads to optimize this train-the-trainer model. So we meet with our equity leads. Every school has an equity lead, but not yet has every school utilized their equity lead in the same way. So some of them have co-led and co-facilitated some of the work with their school principals, while others are leading the work and actually being given some of the faculty meeting times to be the person that is doing the presenting. There's no one right way or wrong way, but we do want the equity leads to feel like they have the tools to be a trainer in this work and then to turnkey that training at the schools and become part of these action plans that we're talking about in our school improvement plans. We also want to continue with our personalized support to schools. And what we mean by that is, we have Paul Forbes, who does go to different schools and addresses with them what some of the root causes may be and provides a variety of support, whether that is to the equity lead or whether that is to the school leader. The great thing about Paul having done this work for so long is that he really can meet the school where they're at and really bring with him the tools that he has utilized in his other work. And so that is part of it. Marianne, what I included here is part of the professional development structure for next year that we were thinking about. Do you want to explain a little bit about that?
Sure. So, a lot of our professional learning for our leaders over the past few years has been kind of district-wide. And, some of it has been level setting, building shared understanding, shared language, and a shared focus. And it really feels like we're at a really important moment to think about how are we further differentiating our supports. So we have had, some cohorts over the past couple of years, whether it be principals or assistant principals in their first 3 years of service, and providing coaching to our newer leaders. But really kind of thinking about like where do we have opportunities to bring together smaller cohorts of school leaders around a shared problem of practice and then engage them in like some real job embedded learning where they're visiting each other's schools, they're engaging in new learning about that problem of practice so that when you have a smaller group, you can move a little bit faster. And the idea being is that they can kind of test run some new ideas, so like almost like a pilot that then if we see success with those pilot ideas, then that learning can be shared from those leaders with the broader community, and we can take that work to scale. So, this idea of like bringing together a group of leaders focused on a problem of practice, whether it's related to a specific area of disproportionality or it's a continuation of this belonging work, but for folks who their data shows that this is a need, and that this is something that it just gives them a very specific support for their SIP equity goal. And not everybody would get the same support. And it's just a way that we're thinking about how we can be responsive to the needs of the leaders and the schools at this moment in time.
Yeah, and actually differentiate their experience the same way we expect the schools to differentiate for the experiences of the students. But with that, that is our presentation, and I will leave it up for a bit if you want to revisit any of the slides or if you have any questions and want me to come back, or I could stop sharing if you
Does anybody
prefer.
have any comments or questions? Because I have a mouthful.
Oh.
So I don't want to. Does anybody have any questions or comments before I?
Why don't you go ahead, Sherry?
So what I was going to say is that this is amazing work. It's very impactful and strategic. And what I'm hearing is how central office staff support the work that is happening in the building. So often people seem to have, they don't have an understanding about how important it is to have a central office staff to help our teachers facilitate this work. And it's particularly important when you're talking about equity and changing culture. And my sense is that the staff in the buildings would be hard pressed to do a lot of this work without having the coaches and the professional development and all of that support that comes from the central office staff.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. There has to be a greater understanding for what the system is doing. So a lot of school leaders can implement something that is unique to themselves, right? And to their school environment. But this whole approach of being strategic and actually looking at how the system may be working against itself or have in place policies that actually do not support the goals of the board or of the superintendent. at that level, that macro level, before you get to the micro level of implementation, it does require somebody that has access to certain information. And to be honest with you, like a school leader has information that's related to their school building, but they also have other responsibilities and other things that they're keeping their eye on. So having a person be focused on our equity initiatives at the macro level and at the district level allows us to keep that work as part of our priority. So I couldn't agree with you more. And then the coaching matters because different people are at different levels of their approach. They're just having the tools to have some conversations with other staff members, and then also having the tools to be able to do this work in a thoughtful manner where you're moving the work rather than causing the system to actually have other unintended consequences or tensions.
And you talked about addressing some of the barriers that helped you to be able to yield the growth. So what would be a particular barrier, a barrier that you feel that you all have been able to, or the staff has been able to address in order to help our students?
And I'm going to have Marianne also help me with that. Well, because I don't want to be the only one speaking, but I'll let you go first, Marianne.
Well, the first example that came to mind is that for a while, our MLL students and our students with IEPs, they are entitled to receive additional services. And those additional services for a while were delivered in a pull-out setting. And so the student would be removed from the classroom, brought to a space to work with, a certified individual who specialized in that particular area. The challenge with that is that they are now missing out on classroom instruction. And so while they might be receiving, some very specialized services to meet their needs, we're also then creating a gap by removing them from classroom instruction. And so a shift that we've made in the model is to provide push-in services to the greatest extent possible. So having the MLL teacher push into a literacy class to pull, perhaps do a small group and, but focusing in on what the focus of that lesson is and providing that additional support. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't times when it is important and meaningful and appropriate to be pulling a student and providing those services in a different location. And there's nothing wrong with that. But to the greatest extent possible, we want to support kids with accessing grade level content, not creating a barrier to them accessing it.
Another concrete example, Sherry, that I'm sorry, Ms. McCready-Pritchett, that I will point out is, for instance, access to the right data and then being able to be coached. So for instance, one of the barriers that we were having are that, let's say, a group of students within a school are not meeting the academic growth or the academic achievement that they should be meeting. And so they're looking at, do they need additional interventions? What is it that is actually preventing them? Is it the teacher instruction? So you're asking yourself all of these questions. And then finally, and this is a real case, that principal actually looked at their chronic absenteeism, and they realized that the same students that were not making that academic growth happened to also be the same students that had really poor attendance. And so then we would have spent all of this time targeting interventions, refining those interventions, but if those students are not there, they're not even receiving the interventions. So that coaching of having somebody be able to get them to ask the questions. That's what's so powerful about this PLC model. It's that it allows people to actually work on a problem of practice and ask themselves, what are the root causes? What have other people done that has given them the desired results? And then how within my own environment can I either replicate that or have a similar approach that works with the resources that I have. So that coaching piece and that community piece is also another way that that having a person outside of the school being able to connect the pieces is pretty helpful. Well, not pretty helpful, is required. Yeah.
And I will say, my 3 years on this committee and to see the transition and transformation as far as the students are concerned and staff buying in
Yes.
is truly a detriment to what the cabinet has been doing in central office overall. As you know, Sandra, my biggest thing was coming in when I saw those numbers as far as chronic absentees and when I saw the suspension rate, that was a red flag for me, and you and I had several conversations in
Mhm.
reference to that. But to see where we're at today from 3 years ago, it works, and not only it works with the help of all those seeing that. And once students buy into that and understand that and see the support overall, shows exactly the progress of this program and how essential it is that we continue to move forward and make sure that we're all continue to do what we need to do in reference to this, because it's amazing, from 3 years ago to today. It is truly, I saw the
Yeah.
numbers, and it was very concerning to me, so it went from concerning to non-concerning because those numbers are still dropping, and that's
Yeah.
amazing. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
But I can just say, I applaud you guys for doing this and the work that you put into this. I really like the fact that you're pushing to push into the classrooms as opposed to pulling the kids out of the classroom, because I know there's a social component to that, being pulled out of class and feeling
Yes.
like you're not like everyone else. So thank you for doing that, because I know the kids and the parents appreciate that. So we're in the right direction.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. And it's not any one thing. I don't even think we can put it all into a slide deck. It's many different things with many different people. And I think Chair White also hit the mark when that buy-in piece needed to occur. And we can say right now, all schools feel that this work is important, but not just important, that this is the work. This is the work, because everything that we talk about, from academic achievement to engagement to the graduation rates, it really does stem from our focus on equitable outcomes and access.
Yeah, I'll just add, I agree with my colleagues. The presentation was well done, well informed, and it shows that everyone is has the same mission, working together. Sherry's emphasis on the central office staff supporting the work in the schools, it all works together. So not one person or one school can do it, and the numbers are showing the buy-in from the entire district. So thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for promoting that and pushing that.
Thank you, Ms. Prezi.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have any other questions or comments? If there are none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion, Ms. Prezi, second by Mr. Oliver. Again, staff, Sandra and Marianne, thank you so much for this.
Thanks so much.
Very comprehensive, and it's good that we're heading in the right direction. And hopefully we have the supports in place to make sure that we continue going in that direction, and things will continue to get better and to improve.
Okay,
So thank you.
we will make sure of that. Thank you so much.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Meeting
Okay.
adjourned at 6:48, guys. Thank you.
Okay. Have a
Thanks,
good
everyone.
one.
Bye
Have a
now.
good one.
Have a good night. Thank you for all that
Thank
you're doing.
you. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye-bye.
You're welcome.